Hey everyone, welcome back to I Dream of Homestead. I'm Josephina and today we are in the kitchen making some really easy citrus and chipotle marinated tacos. It is currently 12 o'clock in the afternoon and we usually don't have dinner until about 7 or 8 because we run on Latino dinner time. So to get this meat ready, I like to try to marinate it in advance. If you can do it overnight, it is so much better, but the longer that you get to marinate this, the more flavor that it takes in and the yummier and juicier this meat is. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this now. If you can only do this an hour ahead of time, that's totally okay. My recommendation would be to let it marinate on the counter and not in the fridge. That way the meat starts to loosen up and then it takes in way more of that flavor than if you leave it in the fridge where the meat kind of tightens up and takes longer for it to take in that flavor. So to marinate this, I'm going to do the juice of 1 navel orange and the juice of 1 lime. For oranges, because they don't quite fit into my lemon squeezer, I like to cut this into fourths and juice it that way. I said fourths, but I meant each half into fourths, which is actually eighths. So now that they're cut into eighths, I'm gonna juice each piece. Now that the orange is juiced, I'm gonna juice the lime. So now to this juice mixture, I'm gonna add in oil. Normally I don't measure this, but since I'm doing this for you guys, I'm gonna scoop this out with a measuring spoon so I can figure out exactly how much of this I'm using. So that was chipotle powder. And now I'm gonna add in a little bit of cumin and salt and pepper to taste. Next, I'm gonna add in anywhere from 4 to 6 cloves of garlic, depending on the size. If you guys haven't heard me talk about this before either, I like to smash my garlic as much as possible before I go through to mince because it makes chopping it up so much quicker and so much easier. I went with about 5 cloves of garlic. They were pretty big ones and they smell so good. Mix the marinade well. Now I'm gonna take 1 small onion and thinly slice it. Now those get added into the marinade. And these, you guys, are not gonna go to waste at all. Once the meat is grilled, I like to cook these in a cast iron until they're nice and soft so that I can add them to the tacos, and they are, so good. Never fails, no matter how many onions I cut in my life, I end up like this. And last thing I'm gonna do is add in this 1.5 pound flank steak. So I'm gonna put it in and toss it around. Really push it into that marinade. If you guys own Ziploc bags, you can definitely stick this in a Ziploc bag and let it marinate there. I do not have any. I use those silicone bags and none of the bags I have are large enough to hold all this. Okay, so now I'm gonna leave this covered in the fridge for the next 6 hours. About halfway through, I'm gonna come in and flip it and do the same thing of arranging the onions on top. That way it's really soaking in all the marinade. So I will see you guys back later on tonight, which for you will be in about a second. She's a small harvest, but I'll take it considering all the soil problems I've had. Something is definitely better than nothing. I don't have very many of them, but I'm gonna take some jalapeños for the salsa. These are growing in just as stunted as my poor plant is. And these plants are gonna be coming out very soon. All right, guys, it's been 6 hours. I have pulled the meat out and I have it sitting on the counter. That way it can get to room temperature as much as possible before I go and put it out on the grill. What I'm gonna do next is take all these tomatillos and these peppers that I got from the garden, and I have a comal right here heating up with a piece of foil on top. If you don't have a comal, you can use a dry skillet. You can also do the skillet with a little bit of oil because these do let a lot of juice out once they start to fully cook through, and sometimes that can stick. So to avoid that, you can add oil into the pan. But I'm going to add those straight on there and I'm gonna let those start roasting. You can also put these on a sheet pan in the oven under broiler on high heat until it has completely charred all of it. You want the charriness because it just gives it this level of flavor that nothing else can give it, and it is so worth the extra step. So next I'm gonna cut a quarter of this onion to add onto this comal, as well as 4 cloves of garlic. And I'm putting the garlic right onto the comal with the peels on so that the peel can get charred and not the actual garlic clove, because then it gets that bitter taste that you don't want garlic to have. So I'm just going through every once in a while and making sure that I rotate everything so that all the sides get that yummy charriness. You want this on a lower heat because if you have it on too high of a heat, then the outside's gonna char before the inside gets its chance to cook through. And you want it to cook through the middle because it'll cut back on that acidity and it take away that raw flavor that it has, because obviously it's cooked. But it'll take away that raw flavor and then give you that yummy salsa verde flavor that you're looking for. If you don't have time to do the roasting, you can throw everything but the garlic and the onion into a pot of water and boil it. And then you can add everything into the blender once the tomatillos are completely boiled. So while all of that is doing its charry goodness, I'm going to mince up cilantro and onion to add on top of the tacos. I love the smell and flavor of fresh cilantro. It is my second most favorite herb, except I don't like cooked cilantro. Like, I can handle small amounts of it, but too much of it. I'm going ahead and pulling the garlic off just because that always chars way faster than everything else and I don't want it to burn. My tomatillos are done. See the charring here, and it's squishy now. So I turn that off and I'm gonna leave that on there because I'm okay with it softening there a little bit longer. And I'm gonna continue to work here. And that goes in with the onions. Up next, blending time. So I'm going to take everything that I charred and put it into the blender along with the garlic cloves, but I'm gonna peel those before I add them in. To that, I'm gonna add in some salt and water. Check it for salt, and you guys might hear my dog in the background eating. Oh, perfect. So good. And because the name of the game in my kitchen is usually work with what you got, I don't have any of the good tortillas. I only have the frying tortillas, which I explained to you guys in my last recipe video where I made the tacos dorados. So I'm going to be making some tortillas with Maseca. It always comes with instructions on the back of measurements. It can work out, but sometimes you need a little bit more water, you need a little less. The only way you're gonna really find out is to do it and cook them and just see how they turn out. I don't have exact measurements yet. I haven't quite perfected it the way that I would like for them to be. So that's why I'm not gonna go into detail about how I do it measurement-wise, but I am just gonna walk you guys through the process with me since I have to do this anyways. The first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take Maseca and put it into a bowl. And to that, I am gonna add some salt. I know that can be controversial for some people to add salt into the masa, but I prefer just a little bit in the masa because I find that some tortillas taste really bland and they just need that little touch of salt in the dough. So I'm gonna add just a pinch in there. I'm gonna get that mixed in. And before I go any further, I'm gonna remove my rings. And to this, I'm gonna add warm water. I might need a little bit more depending on how this feels after I finish mixing it in. But you want it to be kind of like a Play-Doh consistency. I like to get my hands in there and give it a squeeze so that way it forces the water into all of the flour and gets everything nice and moist. So at this point, I followed the instructions on the back of the bag. But after doing the 2 cups of Maseca with a 1.5 of water, it just, you see how even though I squeeze it, it still like cracks? I don't want that. I don't want dough that's gonna crack because then that just means the tortillas are not gonna do well once they're cooking. So I'm gonna add just a touch more water. I ended up adding a 1/4 cup extra, and now I have a wet paper towel. I didn't squeeze all the water completely out of it. I just gave it enough of a squeeze that it wouldn't drip out as I brought it over. So now I'm gonna separate these two, and I'm gonna place it on top of my masa. That way it does not dry out while I'm working on making the tortillas. If you don't have a tortilla press, you can 100% just take something like those pieces of plastic and a rolling pin and just make sure that you have it layered between the 2 plastic and roll it through. Same thing, put it between 2 plastic and take 2 plates and smush the plates together. Whichever way you can to get these tortillas to be flattened out. Now I'm gonna take a bowl and I'm gonna roll it. The reason that I'm going through and rolling it is so that it compacts everything together and I get a smooth surface. That way when I press it, it doesn't end up with split pieces from where the dough was not properly put together. So now I've got it on here. I'm gonna give it just a little smoosh. And then I'm gonna put the other piece of plastic on top and press. That's too thick to me. Press. So there's my tortilla. And now I'm going to put my hand on the top of it and just peel away. I'm going to show you guys the transfer from my hand to the comal on this next one. You don't want these to be too thin because then when they get too thin, they will not peel off the plastic. They'll end up just sticking to the plastic so that you don't have like a piece of the tortilla on your hand and a piece of tortilla on the plastic. And now I'm going to show you my transfer. Ta-da! I like to do the first flip once I notice the edges starting to lift up. That tells you that the other side is good so that you can then flip. So I know it's hard for you guys to tell, but I can see that the edges are starting to come up, so flip. right, so I tried to go outside and turn on my grill and it's just not happening for me. It says the tank is full, but nothing's happening. So I have moved on inside and I've turned on my cast iron skillet and I'm letting that warm up so that I can add the meat into a hot pan, not a cold pan, because then you'll just be steaming it versus searing it. So now that I've got it cooked, I'm going to transfer it to my cutting board and let it rest there for at least 10 minutes before I slice into it. I've got the meat resting over here covered in foil, and now I've got the pan cleaned out. And to it, I'm gonna add in these onions. I'm gonna let that cook down while the meat is resting, and then I'll slice into it and do all of the yummy things. I'm so ready for this. This is my favorite go-to way to marinate meat for tacos. Unless you just got like a really good quality thin sliced meat that you just do salt and pepper on. This right here though, so good. I'm so glad that I ran out of tortillas. Because this right here on a homemade tortilla, that meat is so tender. It's got a little bit of a kick to it from the chipotle, plus what's in the salsa. And then the acidity to cut through it. It's so refreshing in the middle of all the richness of the taco. I'm gonna add a little onion for you. Those yummy citrusy onions, and here you go. Take a bite. Well, that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And like I said, if you give it a try, please let me know down in the comments what you think. And if you haven't already, I hope that you're willing to hit that subscribe button and stick around with me on my journey to becoming a homesteader. I'll see you in the next one.